This is Jed Disler, and welcome to another episode of The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Today is Beethoven's birthday, December 16th, and I actually had planned today's episode around this monumental milestone. This is also the birthday of Noel Coward, by the way, and also the birthday of the great American composer Gerald Busby. But somehow Beethoven inevitably gets first birthday dibs on this date, December 16th. Remember a few weeks back when I recommended 5 recordings of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, the Emperor Concerto, where my challenge was to come up with 5 recordings that were standalone recordings, meaning that they were not part of any complete Beethoven concerto cycle by that pianist in question. So for today, I thought I would try the same thing with Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 4. And I wondered, could that be possible? I admit that I had to think quite a bit and to really dig into my collection. But I was able to come up with 5 truly excellent and distinctive recordings of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 4 that are not part of cycles, that are standalone recordings, and also recordings that are quite different from one another. So let's begin. First, we have the great Romanian pianist Clara Haskil, who lived from 1895 until 1960. And I recommend a recording that she made in 1947 for the Decca label in the UK, with Carlo Zecchi conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra. It's true that Clara Haskil could sometimes be a rather soft-edged and reticent Beethoven player, which is evident in her various recordings of the Third Concerto and the Tempest Sonata. But she's not reticent or soft-edged in the Fourth Concerto. I mean, there is plenty of rumination when it's needed, but she has such a strong sense of inner rhythm, and the animated direction of her phrases provide a stimulating counterpart to the London Philharmonic Orchestra's really excellent and very rhythmically alert playing under the direction of Carlo Zecchi. And Zecchi was a fellow pianist, and he was a really great pianist in his own right, and I think he should be the topic of a Piano Maven episode in the future. Anyway, this 1947 recording also had a big sonic advantage back in its day, because Decca's full frequency range recording techniques were almost state-of-the-art in the late 1940s, and on many of the Decca recordings from that period, you got a wonderfully alive ambience and sense of room tone and sonic depth. For example, there was a recording of Stravinsky's Petrushka with Ernest Ansermet in the late 1940s that drove audiophiles back in that day kind of crazy at the end of the 78 RPM era. That was considered like a real audiophile showcase. And likewise, the Clara Haskil Beethoven Fourth is very well recorded for its time, and it's a marvelous performance that's held up very, very well over, I guess more than 77-something years. I should mention that Clara Haskil plays the more commonly heard first movement cadenza that is the same one that Arthur Schnabel played and Leon Fleischer and Claudio Arrau favored as well. Now for our next standalone Beethoven Fourth Concerto recording. I've always loved this recording from 1953 with Edwin Fischer conducting the Philharmonia Orchestra from the piano. Mainly I love this recording because no matter how gorgeously Edwin Fischer's velvet paws navigate Beethoven's rippling passage work and the outer movements, he always treats the music as an ensemble piece, even when the piano should have the spotlight. You always hear first desk soloists emerging to the forefront, and you'll catch bassoon lines or clarinet parts that often get buried. And I also like how when climaxes start to build, Fischer tends to get a little excited, so sometimes things come just a smidgen out of alignment for just a few seconds here and there, but they snap back in and pull right into focus right away. And you really get a feeling that this is a real performance, not a kind of snip, snip, snip editing job. And Edwin Fischer plays his own cadenza in the first movement, and he opts for a third movement cadenza by Eugene d'Albert. This is really the kind of recording that catches you unaware, and it kind of sneaks up on you as you listen. First, you start listening and you think, oh, it's a little soft-edged maybe, and what's so special about it? It's a little bit on the sedate side, but then once all the elements that I just spoke about start kicking in, you are hooked before you know it. At least that's what happened to me when I re-listened to this performance after many years. Anyway, Edwin Fischer conducting the Philharmonia Orchestra from the piano really deserve a listen. Now, if Edwin Fischer's sonics seem a little distant and diffuse, a 1963 Beethoven Fourth Concerto with the great Czech pianist Ivan Moravec is vividly engineered with every detail accounted for, yet nothing ever sounds way too close up or claustrophobic. Martin Tarnowski, who was Moravec's brother-in-law, conducts the orchestra of the Vienna Musikverein, which is a pickup ensemble, although I wouldn't be surprised if this ensemble actually was the Vienna Philharmonic in disguise, because they sure as heck sound like it. There are lots of small tempo adjustments and dynamic changes that might raise a purist's eyebrow or eyebrows, but these gestures are so organically integrated into the whole. And also the ravishing refinement of the pianist's runs and double notes and his minutely balanced chords will keep many aspiring pianists humble. This recording of the Beethoven Fourth has been a personal favorite of mine for decades, and by the way, Moravec plays the more disruptive Beethoven alternative first movement cadenza, which is the same one that Walter Gieseking plays it, Alfred Brendel, and also Emil Gilels played that same cadenza. Compared to Moravec and Tarnowski, though, Eugene Istomin and Eugene Ormandy, the two Eugenes, sound comparably conservative in their recording of the Beethoven Fourth, which is another standalone recording. But I think Istomin has much more sustaining power in his long lines than does, let's say, Rudolf Serkin in his recording of the Beethoven Fourth with Ormandy from just a few years earlier. And I also think there's more conversational inflection between Istomin and Ormandy and the world-class Philadelphia Orchestra musicians than in the relatively spikier and more confrontational Serkin-Ormandy collaboration. So about the Istomin-Ormandy Beethoven Fourth, let's say you can imagine the Leon Fleischer George Sell recording in a slightly less angular and more urbane and texturally ripe guise, and you'll have an idea about what Istomin's recording is all about. And I really, really like this recording a lot. I've always had a soft spot for it. It only first appeared on CD, by the way, as part of Sony BMG's collection of Eugene Istomin's complete Columbia Masterworks solo and concerto recordings, for which I happen to have written the annotations. However, I'm going to save my biggest surprise for you last, the fifth of my standalone Beethoven Fourths. Actually, you get two performances of the Beethoven Fourth in this release, featuring pianist Jerome Lowenthal, supported by Karl Topelau, conducting an unnamed orchestra that was based in Cleveland. And actually, these two performances are the same performance, except for the first performance, Jerome Lowenthal inserts Beethoven's original cadenzas in their proper place. And then you hear the concerto presented again, but with cadenzas by Frederick Rzewski spliced in. And Rzewski's cadenzas are decidedly un-Beethovenian, to say the least. And these are live archival recordings, I believe. And I think that Lowenthal's imaginatively inflected playing reminds me a little bit of Arthur Schnabel's nervous energy and angularity, but Lowenthal definitely goes his own way, and he's always creative in his phrasing without ever doing violence to the music. Now, for this double album, Jerome Lowenthal also includes on standalone tracks alternate cadenzas for the first and third movements by Clara Schumann, Anton Rubinstein, Hans von Bülow, Johannes Brahms, Camille Saint-Saëns, Frederick Rzewski, of course, which was inserted in the full performance. You have cadenzas of Ferruccio Busoni, cadenzas of Leopold Godowsky, Ernst von Dohnányi, and Nikolai Metner. And if you want to, you can easily program your CD player to place any of these individual cadenzas in context within the concertos. And it's fascinating to hear all these cadenzas. Actually, Maria Udina recorded the Brahms cadenzas in her recording of the Beethoven Fourth, which is another standalone recording, actually. And Arthur Rubinstein's standalone recording of the Beethoven Fourth with Thomas Beecham from 1947 used the Saint-Saëns cadenzas. But with the Jerome Lowenthal release, just the novelty of being able to pick and choose from so many cadenzas really makes this release quite enticing. It's on the LP Classics label, and Jerry Lowenthal wrote some really informative notes for this release that include more than a few amusing anecdotes. And while I'm thinking about it, if you want other recordings of the Beethoven Fourth with non-Beethoven cadenzas, Joseph Hoffman's various air-check performances used the Karl Reinecke cadenza, and so did Wilhelm Backhaus. He used the Reinecke cadenza. Also, Alicia de la Rocha, curiously enough. Wilhelm Kempff always played his own cadenzas in the first, second, third, and fourth concertos, and I'm sure there must be many more recordings out there. The topic of cadenzas alone could cover a whole bunch of Piano Maven episodes. So to sum up this discussion, if you want to explore Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto, and who can deny that this music is special and enormously gratifying, you will get lots of listening pleasure and illumination from Jerome Lowenthal, Eugene Istomin, Ivan Moravec, Edwin Fischer, and Clara Haskil. These 5 recordings of the Beethoven Fourth Concerto hold a special place in my collection, and hopefully they will in yours. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to being with you for the next episode.